So now let's talk about the Markel Insurance Nassau Stakes, which is part of the Fillies and Mares division of the Kipco British Champions Series. There is a trainer with a strong hand here, and he's John Gosden.
Izzy Top's been a real success story this year.
Yeah, she's a talented filly, always has been. And she won listed race in the spring at Newbury, and then we went to the Oaks. She didn't stay. She got third, but she didn't get the trip. And not a surprise if you look at her pedigree. And then she came out of the race with a problem. We got that sort of, she had one more run at St. Cloud in the autumn, and she won a Group 3, and then the owners of Gamely kept her in training, and she's won a Dahlia, a Middleton, and now a Pretty Polly. So she's a very progressive filly. She's in good terms with herself. A mile and a quarter's her trip. She enjoys some give in the ground, so obviously we'll see what's happening with the weather.
Does the fact that she ran so well at Epsom before not staying give you confidence that she'll be fully as easy at Goodwood?
Yes, I think so. I mean, she handled a downhill section. Didn't love it, but she handled it. So you're quite right to point it out. Off the top of the hill on the upper track, the mile and a quarter, that's quite a little run downhill. But no, I think if she has her ground, that'll suit her. We have the Fugue in the same race. And she's never had her ground since the Musadora. She had it at Epsom, but she got sort of cleaned out early. And then the Ribblesdale, she ran well, but it wasn't her ground. So she's just a filly who wants top of the ground. So if we get top of the ground, it would very much favour the Fugue, yeah.
And could a mile and a quarter be an absolute option? She's clearly stayed a mile and a half well, don't get me wrong, but do you think she could be every bit as effective at mile and a quarter?
Yeah, I do, because she has a very high cruising speed and a great turn of foot.
Izzy Top finally got her Group 1 stripes last time in the Irish Pretty Polly, Eddie. I was really pleased for her, and she handled quite testing conditions.
She did, and I think her trainer, as he said, feels that she's better in soft conditions. She may or may not get them at Goodwood, but she has got some form on fast ground as well as a 3-year-old. She's very consistent too, and very tough. We saw that we've seen that in all her races this season. Her Middleton win was another striking effort. So she's going to be a big player. Now,
a filly who had no luck at all at Epsom this time around, Steve, was the Fugue, who suffered some ill luck in running before finishing fast.
Yeah, she acquitted herself really well. She was arguably the best filly on the day, but certainly one of the best, whatever. The other thing I think about her, although she undoubtedly stays a mile and a half, you can't run like she did in the Oaks and not stay, I think she'll be fully effective. She won a Musadora, but she'll be fully effective at 10 furlongs.
She showed a brilliant turn of foot at York, and that was rather blunted by Epsom, by being shuffled back early in the race. Ground comes up fast here at Goodwood on the Saturday. I think that brilliance will be back.
There is no doubt, really, which filly, Eddie, has the best form in this race, and that's No Fairy.
Yeah, 5 times a Group 1 winner, globe-trotting as well. That's not easy. She's won right the other side of the globe in Hong Kong and Japan. And she won the Oaks, of course, first time attempting a mile and a half, but she's equally effective over a mile and a quarter. She was second in the race last year. She's had setbacks since her last run. That won't make things easy for her, but she's hardened, tough, and she goes on the ground.
Now, Rain has already won a Group 1, that was the Prix de l'Opera last season, Steve, and then went close in the Breeders' Cup as well. What do you make of her run at Royal Ascot?
It was below par. It wasn't up to the 2 performances you mentioned, but it was the first run of the season, over a trip which I think is on the sharp side, a mile, and she had a penalty, a Group 1 penalty. So all things being equal, to make your seasonal reappearance at Royal Ascot quite a tough ask, and she didn't run to her best, but it wasn't an absolutely woeful run, and I suspect we'll see a much, much better Nara Rain in the Nassau, especially as a mile and a quarter I think is more a trip.
Timepiece is trained by Sir Henry Cecil. She's got her Group 1, Eddie, but I felt she rather nicked last year's Falmouth, and she really hasn't been in good form so far this year.
No, you couldn't exactly set your clock by her, could you, Lydia? She does have blips in her career, but she's done this before. She's bounced back from poor runs, but she's one of those fly-by-night fillies who a little bit on the day with her.
Reportedly, she's been pleasing in work for the first time this season. I guess that's a positive, but I'm not even sure at her absolute peak she's as good as 1 or 2 horses in this race.
Sea of Heartbreak just improved all the time as a 4-year-old last year. Eddie, is 10 furlongs her trip?
Yeah, I think so. She's a horse who bounces off the fast ground, and if she gets that, she will have a chance. She was 5th in the EP Taylor, which is one of the top Fillies and Mares races worldwide, a very valuable race over 10 furlongs out in Canada. That shows she's capable of making a splash at this level. Not a forlorn hope, but then I've got a soft spot for her.
Well, I like her too. She's got a turn of foot,
Yeah.
and if it turns out to be a tactical race, she could be quite potent, I think.
She can. She's got speed, and the stable's been in really good form this season. I know she hasn't, but there's still room for her to come back.
Well, it's a race for fillies and mares in the Kipco British Champion Series, so I think we're almost contractually obliged, Steve, to talk about Maybe.
The difference is it's 10 furlongs this time, Lydia. It is quite possible that the 1,000 guineas, the race came too soon for her, over a mile. It is conceivable that she didn't stay the mile and a half of the Oaks, and I'm definitely prepared to believe that the soft ground was against her in the Falworth. So maybe 10 furlongs on decent ground is exactly what she wants.
Maybe, Eddie, maybe isn't good enough.
Maybe, Lydia. Her homework has always been brilliant, apparently, and she hasn't really translated it onto a racecourse since her 2-year-old days. Maybe she's just never going to reach those heights again.
She is, to me, I think, beginning to look like a 2-year-old who is progressive, and it just hasn't really clicked as a 3-year-old. But I do think it's conceivable, did you use conceivable, that 10 furlongs is going to be her trip.
And in none of those races has she run badly.
No, true.
There's not been one bad run. I'm loath to completely write her off.
And it's quite traditional, Steve, seeing as we're talking about fillies and mares, that you should quite fancy Laytime.
I do think the 10 furlongs will really, really suit her. Whether she's a Group 1 filly, I mean, her form says she's not. I think she's better than she's shown this year. And I really would run out of excuses if 10 furlongs and decent ground doesn't see her in a better light.
I'm not sure you'd quite run out of excuses. I don't think she quite handled Epsom, did she?
I hadn't thought about that. Oof, Yorkshire Oaks, here we come.
I'm going to go for Narain. I think there were excuses, reasons for her run last time, and back up to a proper trip of 10 furlongs. I think she can prove once again she's a Group 1 filly.
A filly who's had valid excuses for both her last 2 runs, the Fugue.
I have a feeling that a mile and a quarter on decent ground is exactly what the Fugue wants, and I think she'll get it.